We are jumping into a grown-up conversation. We like to say a PG-13 chat on a topic you might not want little ears to listen in on, so this is your chance to press pause, press mute, or send those young ears out of the room. You know, in popular culture, we hear about how important physical touch and intimacy is for men, and that women just don't have that same drive or desire. But what if this isn't the case in your marriage? My next guest says there are a good number of women who fall into that higher desire category. Here with solutions to balance out this important component of marriage is certified sex therapist Laura Brotherson. Great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Wonderful to be here.
Can I ask you a couple of questions up front? Sure. So we've been talking about this topic, and we address it on this show for a couple of reasons. One, we know that it's really important. It's an important part of a healthy marriage relationship. We do so very sensitively and respectfully, considering this public platform. But every time we address the topic of intimacy, we hear two things from women. We hear gratitude, right? Thanks for talking about it in such an appropriate way, and that's credit to you and the way that you handle it so appropriately. But we also hear from I will call it a vocal minority, a group of women who say, you got it wrong. Yeah. Meaning, we oftentimes say, this is kind of a man's world. The desire is there. He needs it. He wants it more than women. And some women are out there saying, it's opposite in my marriage. And my question for you is, as the years have gone on, I feel like we're hearing more and more from that group. So my question is this a growing number of women out there who are maybe getting comfortable with their sexuality and saying the rules are a little reversed? Yeah, that's for sure. Women are getting a little bit better. I like to think of that as, I mean, my whole mission is to bring women up to that we have a balanced sexual desire. I mean, that would be my objective. And so, yes, we do have this we'll talk about that's 20% of higher desire wives, but it is kind of growing, I think, for multiple reasons, but it's kind of a good sign, as we'll talk about. And is that the number, 20% that you say? That's our 80-20 rule, that, you know, that is 80% is the stereotypical higher desire husband, but 20% is a higher desire wife. And that's a lot of people. Yeah, that's a lot of people. As we get into your advice today for those couples out there who aren't in sync or feel a little unbalanced, does this advice particularly apply to women, Laura, or could this apply to maybe a man on the flip side? Yeah, so what we're going to talk about really, as I was going through it, is it's very much applies to whoever is the lower desire spouse. Okay. In that case. Lower desire or higher desire, depending on how we're asking the question. To set the groundwork here, you say there are some concepts we need to understand, and one is that healthy female sexuality is not easily developed. Well, yeah, and you can probably understand that pretty easily, but we don't really have the kind of open, positive, affirming sexual environment in which to raise our daughters, raise our women. Men kind of don't need that as much, but if women don't have that, we are having a hard time developing healthy sexuality. As in, we're not talking about it? Not talking about it. It's not really positive. It's not really affirming. It's kind of taboo. It's kind of under the rug. It's kind of embarrassed, awkward. It just, that doesn't help us women. And I have to think that it's not happening in that context or by that definition for men either, but you say men don't need that. They don't need that. They've got testosterone, which is the competing factor for women. I'm going to talk about psychological testosterone that women can develop as they develop and embrace healthy sexuality. What would you say is the #1 problem that higher desired wives face or feel? Well, I think they really struggle with, you know, think about it. Whoever is the higher desire spouse, that tends to be their primary way that they feel loved. And so if the other person, in this case, if the husband is just less interested in being physical, then that means that she's kind of constantly feeling rejected, is the main thing, hurt, and especially for women, undesirable. But we'll talk about this in the next part, but that's where women need to not go there, because it really is not so much about that desirability factor. All right, so step #1, don't take the lower desire personally. Don't internalize that. You also want couples to make peace with your marriage's sexual dynamic. Yeah, I almost want to back up just for a little quick second, because I do want to mention the research that we have on the higher desire wives, that there are so many positives about them. They tend to be more positive attitudes sexually. They have a better sexual self-esteem or sexual self-confidence, if you will. Okay. Better body image, which is huge, because that's almost one of the hardest, difficultest things for women. And they just have a generally healthier sexuality. And so that whole concept of those positives, that's kind of this psychological testosterone that women can develop to match their physical testosterone. Yeah. And that's where we can develop what I call a sextraordinary marriage.
And that marriage, you say, we can come to peace with the dynamic, whatever it is.
Yes, and that's really important, because if you're frustrated with your dynamic, you're gonna struggle. The best foundation for change is acceptance. So when you accept that dynamic, it's just so much better, so much easier. And like with anyone that walks into my counseling office, whatever struggle you have, when you can look at it as an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, I like to say an opportunity to become more Christ-like and develop greater self-mastery, that's a whole better way to make things better.
You want couples to show respect for each other's level of desire. One tip that surprised me, you say back off a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Yes, well, because backing off, if a wife, if this higher desire wife is constantly pressuring or pursuing him, you know, that's going to make it even harder for him to, you're basically messing with his agency, is the way I say it. And anytime we mess with someone else's agency, we're going to get resistance, we're going to get defensiveness, we're going to get possibly passive aggressiveness.
So not helpful in any case.
Not helpful.
You say listening is important, listening to their feelings, their emotions, kind of how they're, you know, resolving this moment.
Yeah, and listening specifically for what makes them feel connected, because in a lot of this is kind of where we talk about brakes and accelerators. You can, if you create this kind of more respectful, open conversation, then you can actually talk about, so what is more, you know, makes you more interested or less interested, and even more importantly, to back up to some of the reasons that men are not, I mean, there's a lot of factors that affect low desire in men: fatigue, stress, marital conflict, performance fears, depression, anxiety, anger, shame.
It's a long list.
So those are a bunch of things that you've got to be able to have an open conversation in order to figure it out.
And you say even if the intimacy, the physical intimacy isn't happening, affection should never disappear.
Well, and affection is just super important, because again, for the lower desire spouse, when touch is always attached to I want to have sex, then it starts to feel like the only thing the other person cares about is sex. And so it's affection that has no strings attached.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This was really valuable. Thank you so much. I know we just scratched the surface.
Yep.
It's a big topic, which is why you wrote a big book.
Yes.
Where can we get in touch with you?
StrengtheningMarriage.com.
All right, Laura, thank you so much.
You betcha.
Thanks for how you handled that.